what's so amazing about his writing is that the more you go back to it, the more you discover in it, because you've experienced more in your own life and you realize the depth of his experience. It was interesting working with Richard Eyre, because when we made Henry IV on film for the BBC, he said he'd directed it once before when he was in his 20s. And this is him in his 60s. And he said when he first directed it, he thought both Henry IV Part 1 and Henry IV Part 2, they were plays about Prince Hal. It was about this young guy who had his future before him, and shrugging off the authority of his father, who throwing caution to the wind and abdicating his responsibility as the Prince of Wales, and he was having a good time, and why shouldn't he? And he thought Prince Hal was at the center of these two plays. It was literally a play about a young man growing up. And then suddenly coming back to it and directing it in his 60s, he didn't see that at all. He saw the plays as about old men. Henry IV, tired, careworn, fraught, worried about passing his kingdom on to his wayward son, and Falstaff, also tired, also lonely, also staring into the abyss of the end of his life with no real achievement and no real companionship and no real love. And his Richard Eyre's empathy and compassion as an artist was invested in these two old men, because that's where Richard is in his life. Richard's someone who's been a leader for many, many, many years, and he understands what it's like, I'm sure, when people underneath him aren't pulling their own weight, which is exactly what's happening to Henry IV. Prince Hal is not pulling his weight. And so of course Richard's empathy was with the older king. And I think that's what's so genius about Shakespeare, is that as we all grow up and we grow old, as audience members, as actors, as writers, as anyone, you see different things in it. Because somehow the depth and the breadth of Shakespeare's experience was as wide and as deep as is possible. The breadth of his understanding about human beings at every level. He understands fathers, he understands sons, he understands soldiers, he understands lovers, and mothers, and drunkards, and cowards, and heroes, and warriors, and poets, and philosophers. He somehow has this pan-compassionate understanding of human nature, which is, I think, what I keep being excited by, is as I grow up, I see mirrored in his writing new parts of myself, which I've only just discovered.
A great joy of blank verse, which is verse that does not rhyme, hence it's blank, is that Shakespeare chose to write in the iambic pentameter, which means, pentameter means there are 5 feet of the iamb, which is a sort of rhythm, da-dum, da-dum, that's an iambic. There are 5 of those in each line, de-dum, 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 de-dum. Now, almost all Shakespeare is written in iambic pentameter, and sometimes the lines rhyme. But the joy of the iambic pentameter is that it is akin to the rhythm of everyday speech. It's not an alien sound. It isn't. It doesn't have a jangle to it like other verse forms do. It doesn't draw attention to itself. It's rather exploring the rhythms that are still appropriate in modern speech. And if I were a little more quick-witted, I'd be able to speak in a blank verse line. I'd be able to speak in a blank verse line. No, that isn't quite a blank verse line, but it's amazing how often you speak in blank verse. It's amazing how often you speak in blank verse. Not quite, but it very nearly. And then here I am touching myself. De-dum, 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 de-dum. That is the rhythm of the human heart. So there's something very personal, very human, very ordinary about blank verse. It's not going as far as you would in a musical where very consciously a performer steps out of the action of what's around them and sings solo for the attention of the audience, probably not looking at the other actors but looking straight at the audience and rhyming, telling the story in a rhyme with music, with an orchestra playing. What could be more alien from the way human beings communicate with each other? But in the context of a musical or an opera, it seems the most natural thing in the world and appropriate and welcome on the audience's behalf that the action should stop whilst a character explains what's going on inside their head or their heart. And the same is true of Shakespeare. In a sense, Shakespeare invented the solo song in that he wrote soliloquies, which simply is a speech spoken to the audience in the absence of the other actors. Now, when we hear a song, oh, what a beautiful morning, there's something about the rhythm and the flightiness of the way that the tune takes flight that conveys to the audience how the character is feeling beyond the words that he's singing. It wouldn't be enough for him to just speak the lyric. It's the fact that the lyric is sung. That's a formal way of telling a story, and it's part of what's in the blank verse, but it's not the only part that's in the blank verse. You don't, I think, post-Freud, want to get too detached from the way that an audience is used to responding to characters telling a story together. So there has to be a sense that the actor is making it up as they go along, even though the actor knows that they've had to puzzle for days, weeks, months maybe.
But if you say to a child, you've fallen in love with somebody, or you know what the feeling of love is, or have you ever envied somebody, something, a toy, have you ever got really angry about something? That's what Shakespeare's about. It's all about those things. It's all about those things. And he says it better than anybody else. You know, I mean, Juliet says, my love is all as boundless as the sea. My love is deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have for both at infinite. It's not my love is all as boundless as the sea. But anyway, it's about somebody being in love. And if you then, it's not a fearful thing, you know. It never need be frightening. And if one doesn't understand it, then it's worth talking about and finding things out about, you know. And there are so many things to unlock about it. So much about Warwickshire in all those plays. You know that lovely thing that I found out? You know, all golden lads and girls all must, as chimney sweepers come to dust, you know, in Cymbeline. And you think, as chimney sweepers come to dust. And then somebody's told me not long ago that those grasses, you know, there's grasses that you find that you pick and you do the thing round and you flick them and they all go like that. That's what they were called. That's what chimney sweepers were. So then suddenly you think, as chimney sweepers, because they just disappear into nothing. You said, oh, that's so, makes me go goose-fleshy when I think of it. The enthusiasm which is essential and wanting to learn about it. Really, I think. And that constant thing of watching other people all the time, watching other people doing it and seeing what you think works. It's like I've always said to students, or anybody, actors, if they're going to play in a theatre, go to whatever it is playing in that theatre before you go there if you can. And James Cairncross, who was on the African tour, took me to see Desert Song at the Palace before I opened to Sally Bowles. And then in the middle of the evening, he gave me a little box. And I opened the box, and there was some cotton wool and a date and a card saying, "Here is the date we are keeping tonight." So nice. But you see, you get the measure of the theatre. I went to the Vic. I used to go to the Vic a lot. But I went to the Vic the night before I did my audition for them in '57 from Central. When I was at Central, I went to the Vic the night before. And I learnt exactly the size that the audition should be from Barbara Gifford, really. Two Gentlemen of Verona it was. And I thought, you just get the measure of something like that. So that's a really essential thing, I think.